there he is. Kia ora, Damien, who's the not so new anymore, you're 6 months in almost, chairperson of the Howick Local Board. You're coming to talk about marine biosecurity. You would have been told you have the normal 5 minutes with some questions, so we'll just check that we've got your volume. Can we hear you?
Yep, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Cool. There you go. Thank you, Damien.
Thank you very much, Richard. Tēnā koutou katoa, everyone. Thank you very much. My name is Damien Light. I'm the chair of the Howick Local Board. Here to talk about marine biosecurity, which I know has already been a topic of discussion this morning. So look, I won't take too much of your time up. Looks like there was a very good, robust and detailed discussion earlier. I suppose, sorry, can we just look to the next slide? So the Howick Local Board is quite concerned specifically about the marine biosecurity risk to the Tamaki estuary, which is in Aotearoa. And this artwork you might be able to see behind me is an artwork that belongs to the local board office. It was presented to us, and it shows some of the wildlife that lives in and around the Tamaki estuary. Some of it's introduced, some of it is native. And so it is just a reflection of the importance that the Tamaki estuary is to the Howick Local Board, and so that's why we're here today to talk to you, to kind of add to a little bit of the conversation around marine biosecurity. The concern in particular is around the increased number of boats that may be required to enter the Tamaki estuary for hull cleaning and maintenance. And one of the earlier presenters mentioned the facility at Half Moon Bay, which is obviously, it's a great facility that does good work. But what we're concerned about is that the biosecurity risks that exist in the Hauraki Gulf might, in fact, come to the Tamaki estuary as well. If I could just grab the next slide, please. Right, so as mentioned earlier on, there's a whole lot of non-native species in the Hauraki Gulf, and some of those are marine pests. There is the Hauraki Gulf Controlled Area Notice. And we know from MPI, Biosecurity New Zealand, that 69% of marine species that get introduced, exotic species that get introduced, come in on vessel hulls. And so controlling and making sure that vessel hulls are cleaned and looked after is very important. And so what we want to make sure is that we're not spreading the risk into other places. And obviously our particular concern is for the Tamaki. Can I just get the next slide, please? And so, as was mentioned earlier on, there is an outbreak of very real live risk to the Hauraki Gulf at the moment, which is the Kalapera, which is up at Aotea, Great Barrier, and Aruhuri, Mercury Island. And what we really don't want, of course, is that spreading. And obviously, as we noticed, there's controlled area notices in place, which stops vessels being able to move in and out of those places. The risk is that it can spread very, very quickly, and once it's established, it's extremely difficult to get rid of. And as was noted earlier on, Doc's been working really hard with MPI to try and contain and remove it, but it is extremely challenging. And what we really, really don't want happening is that it's spreading into other parts of the Hauraki Gulf. And obviously, again, our concern is that we don't want it coming down into the Tamaki estuary. And so the concern is that not just this particular risks, but all biosecurity risks, we don't want them to come into the Tamaki estuary. And so could we flip to the next slide, please? Yep, and so as we mentioned, there's a regional pest plan, which is again a really good document, requires people to keep their hulls clean, and obviously the safest way to do that is to take the vessel out of the water and clean it so that it removes the pests and none of those potential marine biosecurity risks that are then spread. The map you'll see there comes out of the Clean Boating Guide, and it talks about the areas where you can't clean your boat in the water. And you can see the Tamaki estuary is all in red. It's prohibited. You can't clean the boats. You have to take it to a haul-out zone, which is really good. And that's an appropriate response and a good response. The issue is, as was noted earlier, there's a question of capacity at a regional level. And also, I guess, from our concern at the local board, we're concerned about us having one of our a haul-out facility in our area, that boats that are at risk may come into the Tamaki estuary to use the haul-out facility, and in doing so that they may spread the risk with them. And can I just grab the next slide, please? Cool. And so the key message we want to take away, which I think was definitely established and feels like we've got to that point in that presentation earlier on, is that we need a reliable network of haul-out facilities. We need to make sure that we have hard stand and haul-out facilities around the region, so that when someone does have an issue, there is needing requirement, they've got an issue on their hull, they need to clean it, they can go to somewhere that's local and close by. The further they have to travel, the more likely that they will take that risk, that biosecurity risk, and that pest with them and spread it. So it's really important that we have not just capacity across Auckland, but capacity in local areas, so that ships and boats can go to a facility that is nearby to them and it doesn't spread. And next slide. Cool, thank you very much. So look, I think the discussion earlier on captured a lot of the concerns. We just wanted to add our voice as a local board, that we're concerned about making sure that we look and care after the tamaki estuary in our area, and we're very concerned about. And look, we're looking forward to the outcomes of that resolution, that advice that you've asked for earlier on what those options are available to you. So that's us. Thank you.
Kia ora, Chair Light. Thank you very, very much. Very good, succinct presentation on the issues there. Councillor Leone.
Oh, kia ora, Damien. Corinne Leone, Councillor. I just wanted to say, as a Ngāti Pawa wahine, kia ora, Bruce. Good to see you on there. You probably can't see me. Thank you for all the mahi that you've been doing in that space and the presentation. Absolutely agree with the points that you've raised. I just wanted to ask whether you've looked at holding like a chairs forum or something like that with the other local boards to have a combined approach on what your kōrero is about today.
Yeah, absolutely. That is something that is on my list. Unfortunately, we had a chairs forum recently, but obviously the priority has been focusing on the annual budget and obviously the emergency response. But this is definitely on my list to definitely raise it and see how we can coordinate. We did have a short discussion, and I have spoken to some of the other chairs about it. But yeah, I'm keen to get it on the agenda so we can approach it at a local board level as well. But I think to the point that was made earlier on, ultimately, if you want a regional response, it needs a regional outlook, which I think sits with this committee and the governing body.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Williamson.
Yeah, thanks, Damien. And it might be more appropriate for Bruce Kendall to answer this one, but in the previous presentation we had, and I was thinking of raising it as a question, but it really didn't get a chance. The problem with the haul out and the cleaning of the boats can be quite seasonal. And the problem is that if you just say we've got this much capacity and this many boats so it can be done, would be like saying to farmers, we've got this many hay balers and 365 days that you can make your hay. But in fact, boats have to come out at certain times in certain parts of the season, and therefore a much more rigorous standard of what are the days when boats are required to be using it would give us a better measure of the load factors in there, rather than just a global, this is how much and this is how many. Can I get you to comment, and maybe Bruce knows more about that than I do?
Yeah, can I just say absolutely, and yes, I think that point was made earlier as well, that there's a couple of different ways of looking at capacity, and I think that's why we wanted to add our voice, because it's not just a regional capacity as well. It's thinking about whether if there's an issue and where someone needs to haul out, where they're going to go. And what we don't want is boats travelling all across Auckland, or in some cases all out to Northland, to be able to haul out and clean and check their boat. And that's in a proactive sense. If there's a reactive, if there's a marine pest or a biosecurity issue on a specific boat, they're required to haul out basically within 48 hours. So it means they've got to do it immediately. So capacity all of a sudden becomes an urgent need. And what we don't want again is those boats travelling all over Auckland, potentially spreading that risk.
I'm just more keen about that spike at the time of the year, like when the boats are all getting ready for the summer peak or whatever.
Yeah. That's correct. I mean, the Northland Council have got a regulation that you can't go into a marina without having proof of having new anti-fouling within 6 months, or a haul out and clean within 1 month. And so any boats going north all need it at about the same time. And also another thing that hasn't been factored in, that sometimes when boats get hauled out, some of them are able to do it fast. Like for instance, a general haul out and clean, and just to clean, can take a matter of hours. As soon as you have to apply anti-fouling paint, of course, you have to wait for nice weather. You can't do anti-fouling paint when it's raining. And frequently you have to pull out the boat, you have to get the propeller done and the propeller shaft with a different application, and you have to wait for somebody to come along and apply it. The general public don't have the material or the tools to be able to do that. And also there might be other issues, like they might have to remove the rudder out of the boat. That suddenly takes an extra week. And so sometimes boats might have to be hauled out in the hard stand for a few months, because a lot of these people are doing a DIY and they can only do their work on the weekend. And so this is something that I don't think that either of the reports on capacity captured. And so I'm very concerned about the information that's being, the quality of the information that's being given to local boards and council. And I don't think we can make really good, solid decisions on this, especially considering if we've got Calipera, but I know that there's other invasive species that are in the Auckland harbour, close to the ports of Auckland, in fact the silo port where the classic yachts are, that we don't have those pest species in the Tamaki estuary at this stage, and we don't want them. And if these boats are coming into the Tamaki estuary because they can't get into Orams, and they can come into Half Moon Bay because they have capacity, we're increasing the risk of spreading the stuff to the Tamaki estuary right now. And this is the invasive species we've got right now might not actually be the worst invasive species in the world as far as the effect on our environment. This is a very serious problem, and I'm a little bit surprised that we're having to be here today to speak about this. We've got the biosecurity rules for hull cleaning. They're really good rules, but we don't have the ability to be able to comply, and there's big penalties to boat owners right now if they can't comply. So this is a big problem. I think we need to solve it. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Councillor Sayers, you have a question?
Thanks, Chair. I think Bruce might have answered the questions in terms of his comment. So I'll just probably, look, I was encouraged to hear that you might be bringing those, kind of facilitating, bringing those chairs together to have the chat, and obviously if they can get input from those haulage firms, that would be helpful as well. I'm just aware this, when you come back to us with anything, is this a little bit wider in terms of maybe overlapping into the regulatory committees and other committees? For example, in my patch up in Wellsford, I know that they're trying to open, haulage facilities, and they're running into difficulties to able to do that through the council. So any input as and advice and recommendations from you is warmly welcome. So thank you for your efforts.
Thank you. One thing I might like to add as well is it's going to be much easier to retain and upgrade the existing haul-out facilities than it will be to build new ones. And it's not a question of just looking at, where can you do it on the land? It's also, what are the tides doing? How deep's the water? Is there an ability for the boats to be able to stop somewhere before they're able to be hauled out? What are the weather conditions in that location? What about the waves? All the rest of it. So it's a very, very complex matter. So you might be booked to haul out at a particular location on a particular day, but suddenly you've got incumbent weather and you have to wait for another week. So these are the sorts of things that also aren't captured in either of the two reports so far. So this is a big problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you. I'm starting to hear that it's a big problem. I wanted to test the comments that this is a regional issue to be solved regionally. How do people in other parts of Auckland that have boats clean them when they're going out into the harbour? Do they have these stations there, or?
There's a number of ways that traditionally boats have been cleaned. And at one stage, and quite recently, I'm talking within the last probably 20 years, there were just piles sticking out of the water with a concrete pad next to them where the boats would just tie up alongside and wait for the tide to drop out, and then they clean the bottom of the boat. They've all been taken away now because of concerns about the toxicity of the anti-fouling paint going into the water area, and fair enough. So now there's been a move, of course, to restrict people from also cleaning their boats when they're in the water on the mooring. And of course, I've done that myself. And when it's just barnacles and a slime layer, you're actually allowed to do that. But it doesn't take long. If you leave a boat in the water for 6 months, you're going to have significant amount of growth on your hull that will require you to haul the thing out of the water. And that's quite expensive. And there's a waiting list, and I know of boat owners that have asked to book into to Orams leading up to summer because they want to cruise up to go up to Northland, and Orams have said, sorry, we can't haul you out for 2 months. So it is a problem. And also, traditionally, a lot of boat owners, they'll buy a boat, they get all excited about the boat, and they don't understand it's a little bit like owning a horse. And a horse needs regular looking after, so does a boat. I believe there should be a society for the protection of cruelty to boats. There's so many neglected boats around Auckland that have got their own ecosystem growing on them, and some of those things are fine, like mussels are great, and mussels on moorings that filters the water, all the rest of it, but there's also bad things that are growing on these boats. And if they shift these boats around like they're going to have to now because of the new regulations, we've got a problem that we haven't really seen yet. It's coming at us pretty fast because of the new bioregulations.
Okay, thank you. I hadn't heard anything from my local board or my communities about this issue, so I wanted to find out if this was regional or not. I suppose it's because a lot of people in my ward don't own boats.
That's right. Yes, thank you.
Councillor Lee, there's 4 more questions and we are running well behind, so we'll go to Councillor Lee and we'll try and keep we'll cut off questions now.
Thank you, gentlemen. This is really a question to the Director. In terms of the Resource Management Act, there is a clause that stipulates councils must comply with their own policy statements and plans. And if we're not dealing with RMA in regard to the matter discussed by the presentation regarding the Ōrākei hard stand, we certainly are dealing with it under the Biosecurity Act. And I just wonder, in terms of our regional pest management strategy and plans, whether there is a similar obligation for the council to comply with its own rules in this situation, because I think that would be helpful. Clearly we have a situation where an element of the council, the local board, seems not to be complying with at least the spirit and the purpose of our biosecurity and our regional pest management strategy. Thank you.
That's a good point.
Through the chair, of course you're right, Councillor Lee, about councils needing to comply with their own policies. Just a couple of elements of this, and of course we will be reporting back to you at the end of the month as requested in the previous resolution. One question is whether this is a service that council should provide only, or whether this is a service that the market can provide. There is nothing legislation that requires council to provide this. And obviously council in and of itself as an organisation, if we were talking about us complying, if we had boats, etc., then and we do use boats, we would clearly need to do the right thing and comply with our own regulation. But in my mind, the first question is the provision of hard stand or the enablement of that, is that a council only, council partly, or market only kind of provision? And so I don't see at the moment that there is any direct misalignment or non-compliance of council in terms of our statutory and regulatory obligations. But this really goes to the heart of the matter, I think, that the local board and others have raised today.
Thank you, Madam Director. I would venture to say that the market is not so much interested in clean holes, but in property development in our marina sites. That's a problem. We are the regulator, and we have a responsibility over and above that of the marketplace. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Foley.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Damien and Bruce, for your input. Two questions. Firstly, whether you've raised this issue at TEEF, at the Tamaki Estuary Forum, because I've been a member in the past of that when I was on the local board, and I don't recall this ever coming up. So just wondering whether you've had a chance to raise this as an issue with the Tamaki Estuary Forum and the local boards and the community groups involved there. And secondly, if this does require a local response and upgrading the existing haul-out facilities and things like that, would your local board support a targeted rate? I'm from I used to be the chair of the Otara Papatoe local board, and we do have a targeted rate for our swimming pools because that's something that our community thinks and feels is very important, being able to provide that facility. So would your local board consider or support or have that in mind if this is a facility that's important to you? Kia ora. Thank you, Chair.
First question, I brought this up with the Tamaki Estuary Protection Society executive meeting last week. We have not brought this up at the Tamaki Estuary Environmental Forum as an official discussion document, but I think we really do need to. It's very important, and I think that a number of other factors have been happening that have prevented us from doing that. And the problem, I guess, for a targeted rate, if you were targeting boat owners, you could potentially do that, I guess, through the Auckland Harbour Board for moored boats. I don't know how you do it for marinas. And I don't know if the general community outside of the boating community would appreciate having a targeted rate for them, but they may, because it is a part of the looking after the general environment.
Thank you, Councillor. And I think just for the targeted rate, I think that's probably that will be a conversation that we'll have with our community at the moment while we're consulting on our local board plan. And I think that's a conversation around, if we want to take more environmental action and do more to protect the Tamaki Estuary in our area, maybe we need to think about a targeted rate. But yes, that's something we would consider based on community feedback.
Kia ora. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you. Councillor Berry.
Thank you. Just a really quick question, and I know what I kind of heard from Megan's response there is councillors, this might fall into the area of discretionary spending. So just bring that to your attention. So my question is in relation to the Manukau Harbour Forum and also the Hauraki Gulf Forum. Councillor Foley just asked about the Tamaki Estuary one, but have you had any engagement with those two bodies? I guess we've heard quite a bit about the impacts on the Waitemata side, but we have Kaipara as well, and I'm quite keen that there is a sort of joined up approach which looks at those other bodies of water as well. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor. No, we haven't had any direct contact with the Manukau or Kaipara Harbour forums, but as noted earlier, part of the plan is to have a conversation with the other local board chairs and see if there is an appetite to have a slightly more regional approach. But one of the reasons for bringing this conversation to the committee today was to raise it at a regional level that our local board believes that it needs a regional response. And hopefully some of that will be answered through that report or that review that you've got coming back to you next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, thank you. To a degree, my question has already been asked, so please indulge me while we have the opportunity with Bruce before us. Today would have been my late father's, Ted Lee's, 100th birthday, 2nd of March. And I was reflecting on him because he came back from the Second World War and set up Lee's Marine. And Lee's Marine has subsequently been sold to Andrews and Bevan. but he did so because he wanted to make harbours accessible to everybody and that they not just be elitist. Would you like, Bruce, with your experience, to comment on the importance so that boating doesn't become too elitist, whether this would have an impact?
Yes, thank you. I'm very concerned about the direction that this is going, because as soon as we start reducing hard stand capacity, it's going to increase the need for boats to move through the facilities faster, and so that's going to increase the probability that all work on boats is going to be only carried out by professionals in a professional manner, and so it can be faster. And of course, that escalates the cost of owning a boat significantly. This has happened in Sydney and in the west coast of America, and so it has become almost impossible for young families to be able to own and maintain a moored boat, because they just can't keep up with the costs, and it's already expensive to maintain a boat. And I believe it's very important for families to be able to cruise around the Hauraki Gulf and north and south, so that young families and children can engage with the marine environment and understand what it is to see these offshore seabirds, and what is the health of the Hauraki Gulf, etc. And what is it to see a whale in the natural environment, or dolphins? And I have to say that, I've been brought up cruising on the Hauraki Gulf from before I was born, pretty much. And this summer, I'm very depressed about what I've seen in the outer Hauraki Gulf, and that's galvanised me to work even harder to try and protect the Hauraki Gulf and advocate for protecting the environment, trying to restore it. And I guess that's part of the thing that's triggered my us being here today.
Thank you, Bruce. Very appropriate for the City of Sales.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. And I was going to cut it off, but it is your local board, Councillor Stewart, so you are able to ask some questions or got a question.
Thank you. I won't take too much time. Just on the targeted rate, we were talking about the targeted rate. I don't know whether it be appropriate for it to be just for the Howick local board to have the targeted rate, because most of the people that actually use it come from all over Auckland, and even from further. So, what's your response?
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Sharon, and I think that's the conversation we need to have with the community, and whether or not, I suppose, the community would be willing to fund a targeted rate to protect the Tamaki estuary, or whether or not that would be more appropriately done as a user pays, through the boating users or something like that. But I think that's a conversation we need to have, because obviously cost is always a factor with these things, and we're very aware at the moment in particular that council's got some financial challenges, and we don't want to add to that. But I suppose there is a looming a very real biosecurity risk to our area and to all of Auckland, and so we're going to have to do something. And unfortunately, most of these things cost money. So it's definitely a conversation that we'll have with our community over the next couple of months, and just try to understand their appetite. Thank you.
Happy to move the motion, Mr. Chair.
I was going to ask if Councillor Williamson and Councillor Stewart would like to move in second, if that. Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. So, thank you, Chair Light, and thank you, Bruce, Member Kendall. We appreciate you coming. That was a very fulsome and presentation and good answers. So, right, we have a mover and a seconder, Councillor Williamson and Councillor Stewart. All those in favour? Aye. Any opposed? No. Right, we have no extraordinary items, and we're just going to move, for everyone's sake, to a quick, say, 5 or 6 minute break. We'll be back at 5 or 6 minutes past 12 for a bathroom break or a tea break. Cool, thank you.